How's it going, YouTube? Clinton today with another video, and today guys, what the brand new is going to be Know Your Meta Part 2. There's going to be a lot to talk about today because we're going to be covering some pretty intricate decks that I really want to make sure that you know how to beat going into your next event. So if you haven't already checked out my sponsors over at Imperium Duelist to Dragon Shield or Gem, definitely go ahead and do so, and without further ado, let's hop right on into our first topic. The first thing I want to talk about today is going to be Dark World. Now this deck is pretty crazy, there's a lot that it can do, including hand loop. Now, we all hate hand loops. They're pretty bad for the game. If you look at Goki hand loop, that was pretty insane. Any kind of hand loop in general, even when it was Dragon combo and then Diabolos rip one and Levineer rip one, it was pretty devastating. So this is no different. Having a lot of your cards ripped from your hand and then your opponent putting up like a Trigate Appaloosa, kind of tough to deal with, right? That's why a lot of people are main decking Droll. We're seeing that for a lot of different matchups, but including Dark World. Hand loop is pretty insane. If you look at the level 1, when that card gets discarded, you can summon it to your opponent's board, which makes the effect on summon your opponent discards a card, so then you can discard a Silva, which makes your opponent put 2 cards from the hand on the bottom of their deck. And then also, if they hand trap you, they're losing more cards, so it's pretty crazy. There's a lot that you can do with this. Also being able to just, again, loop the level 1, be able to resummon it, pitch another Silva, so it's pretty devastating when this does go off. You also have the ability to just open so many random hands in Dark World. It's called a Fishbowl deck for a reason. Very similar to Dragon with Chaotic Ruler. It really just depends on like what you milled, and now it's just going to be more dependent on what you open. A lot of crazy extenders, including Dangers, and you have cards like Zephyros to bounce back your field spell. Allure is always really random. You have a lot of different ways to open up to combo. Not only can you go ahead and go for the hand loop, but you can put up pretty crazy boards just because you can always loop Grapha from the graveyard to the other level 8. So there's a lot of different things that you can go for. Droll against his deck is GG's. A lot of people, like I was talking about, are maining Droll. 2 in the main, 1 in the side usually. I think that Droll is a really safe call right now. Even if you're able to shut down 2 or 3 searches for your opponent, it's pretty impactful. Now, next format, I feel like Dark World is just not really going to be a competitor. We're going to see a lot of Bish Shields with the new Synchros coming out, especially just DD Crow in general. I really like DD Crow this format in my sideboard. We're seeing a lot of different decks like Math Mech pop back up, so you know that's going to be really important. But the Bish Shields are going to be back, and they're going to be insane. So this deck is going to have a really hard time trying to deal with that. So next format, again, it won't really be that big of an issue. If you're worried about Dark World, I recommend maining Droll, siding Droll at least, and then also siding Bish Shields. I think that they're just really solid against a lot of matchups right now, but Bish Shields are definitely going to be the #1 answer for you beside Droll. The next thing is you really want to Ash the Genta. This card's pretty crazy, being able to just pitch, add the field spell, banish this card, pitch a card, draw a card, reborn this card. It does a lot, so you really want to put your opponent on better head field spell and just go ahead and Ash the Genta 100% of the time. Also, shout out to Simon He going 8-1 at Las Vegas at the YCS. This list is pretty insane, having cards like Lava Golem that are, again, a fiend that you can go ahead and utilize the field spell with really well. Trade in, of course, another really solid option. A lot of dangers. We don't see cards like Bajan here. It's just really a consistency thing, and you really want to see as many power cards as possible. And of course, if you want to just tear through a board, you really want dangers. I remember back in tier format when we used dangers, I revealed Bigfoot like 4 times to pop a rivalry, popped the rivalry, normal summoned Rhino Heart, and was able to go for lethal. So I love the danger monsters. It's a lot of RNG, but they're really strong when they're really strong. Of course, if your opponent just hits every single one of them out of your hand, then they're the worst cards in the world, but usually they're pretty insane. Looking at the sideboard here too, we have Skill Drains, Book of Eclipse, we have the Kaijus, of course, just because those cards are really nuts too. You really want to be able to trade with the Rise Heart as much as possible. Siding Ash Blossom. This is a deck very similar to Pendulum that you can't really open up too many utility cards, because if you do, you're not really able to pop off the same way. So definitely want to go ahead and side those for whenever you know that you're going into a matchup where it's really needed, or if you are just going second. So definitely huge shout outs to Simon He. And moving on to the next deck that I want to talk about here is going to be Plunder Patrol. Now this is the deck that I feel like a lot of people were still very underprepared for. It's a pretty crazy deck at what it can do. Also, the ability to just go second is pretty nice in this deck as well. We're seeing a lot of like Kaiju Slumber and evenly in the main deck, but also having cards like Yord are pretty insane. Now if you're able to summon a token to your opponent's board, it's pretty insane if you're playing against Striker or Kashtira, because just the token alone creates such a huge problem. Now if you have cards like Rivalry or Gozen, it creates an even bigger problem, because now it's even harder to clear the token. You can't even normal summon to play out of it. It's just a really rough time, because now with the Yord as well, you're able to go for the turn 1 play of having the Blackbeard with the draw, summon Liss, and then on your opponent's main phase reborn the Blackbeard as well, so you can go for another special summon out of the extra deck. And I really like Plunder a lot, so let's see what most people are actually doing with the deck right now. So Runic Plunder is a really popular option right now, and I'm going to show you why. Now, if you open up any of the Runic cards and Whitebeard, this is pretty cool. You can go ahead and summon out Hugin effect, pitch the Whitebeard, add the Fountain. Whitebeard effect can go ahead and summon out any of the Plunder cards. Usually, I'll just go ahead and summon Golden Hair because it's a really free, just special summon back to the board. And you just really want extenders. You could summon Bluebeard to go ahead and get another pitch and draw, but usually just getting the extra extender in grave is never bad. Then you'll go for the Blackbeard, and just off the 2 cards, you'll have the Fountain and the Blackbeard, which is pretty insane. Again, just because if you already gave your opponent a token, then you have the access to go for a list and a draw, and there's just a lot of different ways you can get the combo, and your end boards can be really strong. But the number one thing that I feel like a lot of people forget, not only is Ash Blossom just insane against Fountain, but you can also Ash Blossom the ships that come out of the extra deck. So if they have like Brawn or Moark, and you're really reliant on your normal summon, or maybe even the Runic Fountain staying on the board, you can actually just go ahead and Ash the effects of the extra deck monsters. Now, you usually don't want to Ash Blackbeard just because it's a quick effect on both turns, so you don't really gain any value by ashing. But at the same time, if you're able to just go ahead and ash the effect of like Moark or Brawn, the ones that actually interact with your board, I think that that's going to be heavily impactful. Then you also have to deal with a lot of hand traps in this deck typically, even though there are a lot of Runic cards and a lot of Plunder cards. There's still enough room for utility as well. I do want to go look at another Runic deck right now though, and that's going to be Runic Naturia. Now this deck is actually really scary with what it can accomplish because the combo might be very minimal, but the draw engine in this deck is crazy. You can have things like Mole Cricket in your graveyard, you have a really easy line for Baron. There are just so many different things that you can do in this deck that make it quite hard to deal with. So the standard line of play here is going to be using the level 4 here to dump the tree. You'll grab Mole Cricket, use a Runic card to make Hugin, pitch the Mole Cricket, and then add your Fountain. Here you'll make your Charge Warrior, which allow you to draw, and then typically you'll use your Blessing to bring back the level 4 to go into Baron. Now, of course, it's going to be very dependent on what kind of hand you opened, but typically that's the line of play that you'll see a lot of people go for, is that they'll go ahead and make the Baron with their Fountain. They'll have the Mole Cricket in the graveyard, which is a really nice interruption later on, and then you'll also be able to have, of course, your Runic engine, and then whatever you draw into as well. This is another deck that can play quite a few utility cards, so it's definitely very scary and a nice contender in the meta. It did just win the regional in Florida too, so definitely be on the lookout for this deck. Even if your opponent gets put into a really awkward position and they can't put up much of a board, still having cards like Sunflower and Naturia Beast or Barkion can be very hard to deal with. Now, having cards like Dark Ruler and Droplet in your sideboard are going to be really important. Now, I know a lot of people don't really want to play Droplet because they're like, what if you run into Kashtira? But if you side it and realize that not every matchup you're playing against is Kashtira, Droplet is going to be one of the craziest cards for this format, and it's going to put in a ton of work. Definitely recommend having this card on your side right now. There's a lot of big boards being put up, especially if you play against like Sprite. You just want to have access to cards like Droplet. There is another deck though that I do think that we have to mention, and that's going to be Tron, because this is popping up quite a bit. Now again, next format where Bishos are going to be really popular, I think this deck dies down again, but for right now, you really have to focus on a few key factors in this deck. Number 1, if your opponent's going second, you have to watch out for Natasha. You can go ahead and banish the Cyber Angel from your graveyard, target a monster your opponent controls, and then on the summon, you just go ahead and steal your opponent's monster, which is pretty insane because of the fact that you can keep doing this over and over. It's not once per turn. And with Ben 10 at multiple, you can keep banishing them from your graveyard and steal your entire opponent's board. So this is a card that's definitely going to be scary, and you want to deal with this as soon as possible. If your opponent's going first on Tron, they're able to set up cards like Vanity's Ruler, which can definitely be a hard thing to deal with, especially if you don't have cards like Droplet, Dark Ruler, Chalice, what have you, even any of the book cards. You really want to have something though to go ahead and make sure that you can deal with Vanity's Ruler. Pretty crazy card. But the last and most important thing that you got to look out for from Tron is going to be the Amorphactor Pain. This card's really nuts. You're able to skip your opponent's next main phase 1 So you'll go draw phase, standby phase, battle phase. Like you don't even get to your main phase right away, which can be really scary, especially when you're trying to break a board or at least be able to set up enough of a board that your opponent can't really play back into. But if you already set up a board with Drytron and you have a More Factor Pain, typically that's going to be a really hard thing to deal with. A More Factor Pain has definitely been the power card in Drytron lately, and you really want to make sure that you're prepared for it. I do appreciate everyone's support on the channel. We are going to 20,000 subscribers soon, and I'm very excited to get there. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, definitely subscribe. If you haven't already joined my Discord, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, definitely go ahead and do so. And if you want a coaching session over on Metafy, definitely go ahead and PM me on Discord if you have any questions. And I hope everyone has a wonderful night, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.